Yeah, let's go then, yeah. Ready? Okay. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Standards Committee. My name is Richard Stowe, and I'm an independent member and chair. The first item on the agenda is apologies, and I've had apologies from Marion Gibson and Catherine Fuchs. And that's it. And secondly is declarations of interest. Given the agenda, I don't expect there to be any.
Richard, just because on the public agenda, I know that you proposed to defer the item, but on the public agenda, it still has item 14. Until that's done, can I just declare an interest in that item?
Yeah, sure. It's fine, thanks. Okay, and then on to minutes of the previous meeting, which was Monday, the 12th of June. Do you have any, are there any queries or anything with that? Just to say, I do, at the meeting, I do comment on the first draft after watching the video. So if there is anything missing, it is definitely my fault. Are you okay with the minutes? Yeah. Do they capture everything?
Can I just comment on the it goes before our minutes, it's attached in the bundle. The constitution of the committee is as follows, and the independent members is just, we have all our initials apart from Mike. He's just called John. I noticed.
I didn't say that. I noticed, but yes.
It's like John who?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
John.
Yeah.
He's just called John. So he should be M. John on the constitutional constitution of the committee. But he is recorded correctly at the minute.
Thank you. Well spotted. Yeah, good. Okay. Yeah, great. Anything else on minutes? No. So I can approve those. Yep. Just as usual, just a few things, actions that should come up later or that have been completed. Just under item 5, Gibson hospitality policy, there were two things that we'll discuss under training, which was just mentioning the new learning management system, which would contain training records, because that would be very good news for us, because we then may be able to instantly see who has and who hasn't had code of conduct training and other areas of training. And the second item was the anti-bribery and corruption training, which was mentioned by Matt. I'm keen to make sure that the Gibson hospitality policy gets involved in that, so it covers the do's and don'ts of the code at the same time as explaining this is the criminal law, because if you go badly wrong on the code, as we discussed, you enter the area, the scope of the Bribery Act 2010. So that will come up later. Welsh Government consultation, if you remember that, all those questions on the Richard Penn report. The action at the end, thanks to Ben, drafted the response to the Welsh Government for review by the chair, which I reviewed, and it was submitted by the 23rd of June. Yeah. So that's done and gone into the system. And then under item 8, the Standards Committee annual report, you approve the draft subject to final amendments to 2.5 and 6.1 to be agreed by the monitoring officer and chair. That was done, and you will see the end result went to council, and it's on the agenda on item 10. And those are the outstanding action issues. So moving on to the first main item is the adjudication panel for Wales annual reports. This meeting is very much annual report season, you can see coming up next from APW and from the Ombudsman. Just to wind back a bit, I did send out to everybody the current sanctions guidance on the 17th of June, not long after our last meeting, and that was because at the time we were trying to be able to attend some forthcoming hearings, but actually this is a very important document in its own right, and I would recommend you keep it somewhere or download it and have it as a reference document to complement the Ombudsman Code of Conduct guidance. So it's in the same area, and it explains very clearly how they work and their procedures, and in particular the aggravating factors, what makes a breach of the code worse for them is very interesting to read, and the mitigating factors as well. That was point one. The second thing is we did talk about, there was an announcement from the Welsh Government about a consultation was coming on the unification of the tribunals, but when we sat down last time, there was no consultation had actually started. Well, instantly after our meeting, they opened the consultation on the 19th of June, and that closed last week on the 2nd of September. So that did happen, and it looks like they're going full speed ahead with unifying all 7, I think, devolved tribunals into a single structure. The third thing I had was, I'm sorry we couldn't manage to get any attendance at the hearings held by APW, because the 4 we looked at, if you remember, at the end of June and July, all turned out to be on the papers. And their definition of on the papers means no public and no media. So we just couldn't do it. What happened with those, I did look back, is there were three disqualifications and 1 suspension. And all 4 of them involved the breach of 6.1.A, which is disrepute, which the adjudication panel actually says, it says in their sanctions guidance that they see that always as a serious breach of the code. And a disrepute is something that can be added as a breach to a breach somewhere else. So you can breach the code on courtesy and respect, but because of your position, the context, whatever else happened, the background, you can also then get done for a breach of disrepute, and that elevates the whole thing in the eyes of the Ombudsman and then in the panel. And curiously, 3 out of 4 involved a breach of 7A, improper use of your position as councillor, which is something I don't think we often come across. Anyway, all the decision reports, which are detailed, they're all online. So if there was one of those that you thought was interesting, you can always go back and you can read the whole thing and how they came to their conclusion. So on those 3 items, any comments or questions on the sanctions guidance, the consultation, or paper determinations? No. I have a question for you, actually, as litigation lawyer. I did say I had no questions for Ben, but it's interesting. So when you're doing litigation for the authority, how often are these closed hearings with no public or media, and how rare is that in your work?
I mean, it would be pretty rare just on the papers, depending on the issues. I mean, in things like the Court of Protection.
That's children, is it?
Well, the Court of Protection isn't necessarily children. That's vulnerable adults, people who lack capacity.
Right.
Those are generally closed hearings, albeit that's changing slightly, but generally they're closed hearing. Obviously, matters involving children are closed hearings. It's different in the Magistrates Court and the County Court. They don't often deal with matters on the papers. They would go to hearings or settle before they get to court. Right. So this is more of a tribunal process. I think they deal with it on the papers, i.e. no live witnesses. Parties put their submissions in, and the panel will look at the written evidence rather than hearing sort of oral submissions and evidence cross-examination, that kind of thing. Yeah. But generally, yes, it's quite rare in the work that I do. That might be more of a tribunal process.
Yeah.
From another source, I know that the judiciary are promoting at the minute open justice.
Yeah.
So there's a big push for certainly tribunals and the Court of Protection to have, not in all cases because some are very sensitive, but to have applications for open justice that are considered before the case is heard. So this, I mean, we may want to raise that with the adjudication president when the new one's appointed, because that's an appointment that's ongoing, isn't it? There's a new one to be appointed. What's their view on open justice? And exactly, the adoption of that in their tribunals. I mean, that may come in when the unification of tribunals happens within the devolved tribunals for Wales. There may be a more of an acceptance of the push of the judiciary for open justice. I mean, we've all seen, the filming and the delivery of sentencing now being publicly available at the end of a hearing. Well, that's all part of open justice.
Yeah.
So we may want to follow that up with the new president as and when they're appointed, to see how they're adopting it.
Definitely. When I eventually, or when we found out that all of those 4 hearings were paper determinations, I was thinking back to our comments at the last meeting when there was a Welsh Government question about how best to publicise the ethical standards framework. And I think we said the best way of publicising it is to make sure that adjudication panel hearings are widely covered by the media and explained, and so that people see them in their local papers and they understand that if you commit a serious breach, you will get a sanction and it will be done like this. And I was thinking, well, how do the media ever get to hear of? So these 4 hearings, it'd be interesting to know what publicity there was, because typically APW hearings always end up on Wales Online, on BBC, you know, the local paper, on BBC Wales Online, all of those things. You're thinking, but if there's no media there, then they could just miss it, couldn't they? So we will do a follow-up, and we'll link it back to our consultation response and say that's the concern about, because if you've done all of your last 4 all in the papers, no public, no media, no publicity, how does that fit with open justice? Because we did put open justice into the consultation response from last time. Yeah, thanks.
Is it worth mentioning how difficult it was for me as a newcomer, if you like, to actually find information from the APW? How slow their emails were, how automated their emails were. They weren't signed. Someone said they weren't signed. We just had an email, which told us very little.
You're right there. And I've got another one with them because I spotted that on a decision report, they put the wrong year on the date, the signature date. So I just noticed this. And I did it a month ago. I referenced it all and I've had no acknowledgement, and I've just sent a reminder. So that's the only address you can contact them. It's the only way of contacting everybody. It's a single address, which appears to be unmonitored. So I'll raise that as well. So that's to follow up on the contacting and the responsiveness.
There wasn't even a reply to my first email asking if I could attend. It became more frustrating after that, really. Once I saw everyone else had been struggling the same.
Okay, so there's two things then. There's the paper determinations versus open justice, and there's also the difficulty of actually getting in contact with APW on their sole email address. And particularly for people who want to, back to open justice, I want to attend a hearing. Where is it being held? Is it in a physical place or is it online, etc.? Okay. So now if I go on to the annual report itself, which I emailed the report or a link, I can't remember, on the 9th of September, I sent that out. Just walk through this and do interrupt me if anything in here of interest particularly caught your attention. I did note in the forward it says the past year has continued to be a comparatively busy one for APW. They had 4 tribunals.
All on paper.
Yes, that was in the introduction. And then there's the usual explanation of their process, their functions, the law. Interesting, back to the consultation process then on unifying the tribunals. It says here, decisions of case tribunals can be appealed on limited grounds to the High Court. Permission to appeal to the High Court must first be sought from the High Court. Presumably, if they go ahead with what we're talking about, there will be an appeal tribunal and you'll appeal to the appeal tribunal. As will all the unified tribunals.
Yes,
we'll have a single appeal tribunal above them.
Yes.
Which will presumably lower the cost and speed up the process of appealing. That's the aim. Yeah.
And the appeals are, I mean, like all appeals, it's where you err in law, not I don't like this decision.
Yeah.
Please can have another go.
Yeah, right.
The decision maker, as it is deemed to have erred in law, so hasn't applied the right law,
right,
or the right guidance, because there are often practice guidance that guide the law.
Yeah,
Ben knows more about that than I do, but
well, I agree with you. You're absolutely right in what you say.
Yeah. So it can't just be, well, I didn't like what they wrote.
Yeah.
I want another go.
So that's one thing. Then if we're into the bar charts, if you look at on page 9, the number of references and appeals received, you know, they had a bit of it went up in 21-22, it's gone back down. The number decided by year over 5 years is 18 over 5. So it's averaging between 3 and 4 a year, which in the context of you're thinking how many authorities there are in Wales, there's 730 community councils, and principal authorities subject to the code, there's about 30, I think, if you add the parks and the fire authorities and the police and crime panels, there's about 30. So only a very tiny minority of councillors end up at the panel. However, that's for severe breaches. The graph 2.4 I thought was very interesting because the breaches by type, the number 1 is back to disrepute. And the disrepute really doesn't live on its own. It's usually added to a breach of something else. But it means that as soon as the ombudsman, they investigate and find disrepute on top of something else, if you're that councillor, the accused member, as they call it, the ombudsman, then it is bad news because this is where you could be heading. And I think in the sanctions guidance, APW says disrepute is a serious breach because it's damaging the reputation of your position as councillor and of your authority. Then on to the case summaries, which again are very interesting because the full decision report for each of these, I think there's 4 case tribunals. So case tribunals are when it comes from the ombudsman. Appeal tribunals are when it's a member appealing against a standards committee decision. They're generally case tribunals, most of them. I looked at these again, I thought, so this was the 4th during the year, and I think 3 out of 4 were on the papers. So back to the point then. So there was only 1 online and 3 on the papers. So again, this issue of open justice and media coverage and everything is raised. Again, the first one was online, which was former councillor Paul Dowson. And again, you look at this, so disqualified for 3 years, that's a big punishment. They can go up to 5 years, but it's a long time since I've seen them do a disqualification for 3 years. Next one, disqualified for 1 year. Next one, disqualified for 2 years. And finally, disqualified for 1 year. And then there was an appeal tribunal, but they were timed out. And I checked on that. Permission to appeal was refused on the basis the councillor had failed to submit within the statutory time limit. And I did look this up, but it's 21 days of your notification of the Standards Committee decision. You've got 21 days, and it's very strict. And you timed out, therefore, no hearing. And that was it. And that's the report. Anything else of note? Comment on that? No.
It was, I suppose, interesting to see in the one in Llanstanfraid that to date the council has not complied with the recommendations in the timescale required. That, you know, they have been told that all members of this council attend training within a period of 3 months.
Right.
To ensure they understand the code of conduct, and they obviously haven't done that yet.
No, it's interesting. Yeah.
You know, what will happen to them?
At the moment, probably they're probably nothing more than that rap on the knuckles, I guess. Yeah. But this will only encourage the push, you know, to make training mandatory, which I can see from hearing the new ombudsman, Michelle Morris. I've seen 2 presentations by her, one to the chairs conference, and she's really after making it legally mandatory code of conduct training and tightening that up. However, that would probably need legislation to actually legally require, and it might even be elections law. It could be something to do with at election time and signing up, and you know, and whether your eligibility to stand or your declaration of acceptance of office or something like that. So if it means legal changes, then you're into the time in the Senedd to get something through, and will it happen in the current term, and etc., etc. So
well, there may be an opportunity to do that because there are several AMs who are voicing the concerns of the Standards Committee for the Senedd itself and saying it needs to be reviewed. So if there is a review at that point, that would, there may be an opportunity to, for her to put the change in there. She may take that opportunity.
Yeah.
Clyde were on the media yesterday saying that there should be a review of the Standards Committee.
The whole standard setup.
For the Welsh Government.
Okay.
Not for.
But then it could easily, it'll come down to councils, be logical, and to be consistent. Yeah.
I mean, if there had been open justice in this case that Mike's just referred to, and it had been reported that the council
down 4%. During the current year, they closed. That means they assessed or investigated 280. And again, almost no change on previous year. Previous year, 281. In the current year, they investigated 35 and they referred 12, of which 8 went to standards committees and 4 went to adjudication panel. So out of 280, it's roughly 1 in 8 they investigated. And then of those investigated, roughly 1 in 3 got referred. And the serious breaches go to the adjudication panel. But the big difference from last year was, last year they investigated 39, referred 20, so half of them were referred, and 9 went to the panel. So that's the serious breaches. So on the face of it, this looks like in total, a much better year for conduct, because the adjudication panel referrals went from 9 to 4. That was the major change over the years. If I go on to the complaint thing itself, they said in here, we report the subject of the Code of Conduct complaints based on the Nolan principles. And I think, well, that's fine, but I would find it far more helpful if you use the code paragraph numbers like the adjudication panel, because the adjudication panel's got those bar charts and you can link the bars to the actual code. And it comes a problem when it says 61% of the complaints that we could look into, that means that were valid, were about the promotion of equality and respect. And I think that's much too big a category, because, at one end, it's something, that's said verbally, one-to-one, perhaps provocation, at the end of a meeting, someone apologises, maybe it's courtesy and respect, and then there is an extreme end at the other end, and just to say, put it in this big bucket doesn't really help us to see what's going on. So is it the serious stuff, or is it the, some community council at the end of the meeting in the car park, councillor Bloggs called me whatever idiot, and I reported them because it's lack of respect, or is it the serious end of things, and there's no information to say. So I was going to write back to them and say, could you please use code paragraph numbers, and could you break down the 61% into different categories? I also think that bullying and harassment is worthy of a special category of its own, because that typically is quite serious, because and that's often a community council thing or a town council thing, and it often involves clerks. And if that happens, that should be identified separately, because that was mentioned a lot in the Pen Review. There was all that worry about bullying and harassment in community councils. Do you remember? And we said, where's the evidence? Yeah, I know it goes on, but where is it? So that 61% not very helpful. The closed complaints, the numbers I've already been through. But on page 28, the Adjudication Panel for Wales and Standards Committees upheld and found breaches in 96% of our referrals they considered in 2022 and 23. So they're very thorough. Possibly, that's what it means, but that's where they find a breach. It doesn't get overturned by the panel or a standards committee. However, you go onto performance indicators on page 124, they're slow, because look at this one, Code of Conduct complaints. The key one for me is cases closed within 12 months. The target is 90%. And look where they are. They're on 66 or 67%. So that means in 2/3 of cases, something could be hanging over your head and the complainant's head for over a year. It doesn't even say, of those ones they didn't close, how long did they go on for? And I think that number's been in poor territory ever since I've been a member. And look at the last 2 years, very poor. I may have got some. Sorry,
Richard. Just while I'm thinking about it, could that be because once it gets to that point, the councillor or the authority, whoever, brings in their own legal person, and therefore that really slows down the process, because everything has to go to two legal parties for them to discuss, and it's not, it's not simple anymore. It becomes legalistic.
Exactly. Yes, it could be. It's interesting. I did dig out. I thought maybe a long time ago, in 2019-20, they were on 88%. Obviously, they've set that target thinking it's achievable.
Yeah.
And they're not. I think that's. It doesn't need to. Is it to do with people? It's legal advisors, and that just making everything more complex. But that's their own target. You might think closing a case within 12 months is too long anyway, given its code of conduct. We're not doing.
Well, what happens to that councillor in the meantime? Because if they're under investigation, and it's live at the Ombudsman's office, does that mean that impedes their ability to represent their constituents?
Well, no, in general, no. But there is this thing which is they use very sparingly. There's a thing called an interim case tribunal. But I think the Ombudsman can go to the panel and say, we haven't finished with this yet, but we'd like you to stick in a temporary suspension now on someone for these reasons. They're very rare, but they do have the powers. And in the guidance and elsewhere, possibly in the annual report, it will say that they've got this extraordinary power. But no, in the meantime, you're the councillor, you carry on behaving normally as a council, but probably everybody knows you're under investigation. So obviously it will affect things, and it will affect you, and for the complainant as well. It goes on and on.
It must be a huge stress on that.
Yeah. So given that's their own metric, they need to improve that. Just the final thing was the breakdown by topic and by body on page 136. And you can just see in the total numbers of new complaints. Again, it's just not very helpful. Promotion of equality and respect, 61%. That's too big a category. And I think I will write to them and say we need to have that broken down, because there's a huge spectrum of behaviour ranging from, not quite trivial but minor incident through to extremely serious. And it's also easy for that area to get into the disrepute category. In fact, a lot of the disreputes start there. And that's my impression from reading through the cases. On the body, look at town and community councils, change, it's gone down. So 158 new complaints over 730 councils. I'd say, where's the problem, really? And that. And county and borough councils, 122 over 22 councils. Again, numbers are fine. National parks, fire, police and crime panels. How many police and crime panels are there? You were waiting for that question. I know.
Four.
Four,
Chair.
Oh, thank you very much. That's right. So 4. Good. So that means then that of principal authorities, that means we're on 32, doesn't it? Because there's 3 national parks, 3 fire authorities, 4 police panels, plus 22 makes 32. Good. Any further comments or questions on the Ombudsman annual report? No? Okay. Next. Ombudsman again. The annual letter. Probably not much to say about this. This was the document that was holding up the completion of our annual report, because this has got the key scores in the table at the end about conduct. Matt did write to the Ombudsman to say, could we have it a bit earlier so that we can get the annual report out, and they didn't. So it's the letter, it's mostly about services complaints, which don't belong to us. They used to when I started. They belong to governance and audit. And there's really nothing surprising in here, apart from the data at the end. You will see there was just 1 complaint about a member of Monmouthshire County Council, which was discontinued, which you can't really be any better than that. I don't think you'll ever get to 0. And amongst the community councils, there's a total of 5, and again, none of those were continued either. Decision not to investigate, so they all disappeared. I know that Care Went gets a special mention in the table to show that you had 0. Well done to Mike. Yeah. I did ask her. I think the answer is this letter is meant to go to Cabinet and Governance and Audit. And I'm talking with Ben beforehand. We don't think it's yet got there, but that's what Michelle Morris asks. Interestingly, she doesn't say it should come to us. So there you are. Anything to say about the annual letter? No. Fine. Number 7, with the annual letter, I have been keeping this data table just to put the headline number about Monmouthshire members. This isn't about community councils in context. And so it goes back to the time before I became a member, which was 15-16. And occasionally the Ombudsman changes their categories, but these are really headline numbers of total complaints closed. And what you want them to be is, you want the line about referred to standard committee to be 0 and the line about referred to the panel to be 0. And it has been a complete line of zeros, apart from 17-18. And 17-18 goes into that date because that was Councillor Graham Down.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at the dates on that, just an interesting example of the speed of the process. It was to do with his emails to the chief executive, which breached 4B, which is respect and consideration for others. The emails were sent in the first half of 2016. It was referred from the Ombudsman to the panel in December 2017, and it reached the panel on July 2018. Gives you an idea. So over 2 years after the behaviour took place, this became a panel hearing. So that's who the 1 is. Other than that, it's a row of straight zeros, which is very good. Any comments? No data? Sorry, yeah.
I was just going to say, I think you'll find Councillor Down was no longer a councillor in 2018. Equally, in the county anyway.
That's right. He wasn't in the county. You're right. He wasn't, but he was still.
It was as a community councillor, I think, at that time.
I can't pronounce it. Is it Mathern?
Mathern, yeah.
Mathern, yeah.
Mathern.
I'm just reading about it. I heard the name, but yeah.
Yeah, you're right. That's right, because he ended up with a 2-month suspension, which applied to his membership of Mathern. At that time, he was no longer county councillor. Yes, thank you. That's right. That's the data. Yes, next, more ombudsman. Code of conduct complaints process. This is something we talked about in February, if you remember, because I'd had a letter as a chair. The ombudsman was saying we're going to change our complaints process, and we're no longer going to inform the councillor and the monitoring officer immediately. We're going to hold off until the decision is made, yes or no, to investigate. And we discussed that. And I think our views on whether we like that idea were mixed. Well, that's what it says in the minutes. I remember. Did you want to know straight away, or do you want to hear potentially after 6 weeks? We had mixed views on that. And as I was on the Ombudsman site, I just found, and that's why I've just put this on, this very short document, and I don't know whether I'd missed it before, Code of Conduct's complaint process summary dated July 2022, which actually confirms their process and confirms that they will not notify anyone until they reach the point at which they've decided yes or no to investigate. So it's just purely for information. It was something that probably was on their site at the time we discussed this in February, but I didn't find it. And that's the reason it's there. And it's just, that's the process, the outcome of the investigation. It's just 4 pages. It confirms the 2-stage test, although there's much more detail on the 2-stage test in the Ombudsman guidance. Is that okay? That was really pure information item, something we probably should have had in February. 9, moving on. This is a standing item, Code of Conduct training, and there were a few things. First of all, we always have any conduct training delivered, scheduled or requested since 12th of June, which I asked Ben, have you been asked by anyone, community councils, to do any training, schedule any? Not at this point, nothing. And then also ask our county councillor members, have you picked up from your colleagues any request or interest in further training or particular topics or anything? Has it come up in informal discussions or meetings? No? Nothing? Yeah.
Just wanted to say that in one of our previous meetings, we expressed a need for more training for those on planning committees. So that's been happening. We've had quite a few training sessions. So I don't know if that was down to our discussions on it previously, but happy to report we've been having lots.
Good. And is that about, did that cover some of the code aspects as well, like, you know, predetermination and stuff like that? Or
no, not really. It was mainly on tree protection orders and just areas of planning that we needed extra training on. But I recently found a code of conduct for planning, which is separate to the council's code of conduct.
Yeah.
I can forward it to you, but I don't recall when I joined planning committee being sent that document. So I just wonder if that should be sent to members on a yearly basis, just so we're aware that it's there.
Yeah, well, I'm very glad you mentioned that, because that's a long-running issue I had with Matt Phillips, and it never got resolved. And it was something that I discovered by chance it's on the public website. So if you're a member of the public, looking around, I've got a planning thing coming up, what's going on at Monmouthshire on planning, you can find it down there. And what I noticed was it's not in the constitution. So it's a code and protocol, you know, like the protocol for member and member complaints, like what to do if you want to complain about a member, go to your group leader, all that, that's all there. The officer code is there, the code of conduct, and it's not there. And in fact, we even had it, Peter and Rhian may remember, we even had it up for review and we discussed it. And Matt said, oh, it's going to be reviewed by whoever is head of planning and they'll take account of because we had, or I did anyway, disagreement with the advice on the predetermination, which is particularly dual-hatted councillors. So you're a community councillor and you're on Monmouthshire Planning Committee, you're a county council planning committee. What should you do about a planning application if it goes to your community council and then comes to your planning committee, or it's going that way? We had, and I need to follow up on that because recently, Joanne, who's up here today, I mentioned it to her and I sent it to her because she was picking up responsibility for planning. Possibly did the planning lawyer leave? Who's a planning lawyer here?
It was Denzel.
Yeah.
And then Joanne and now Paige Mosley.
Yeah, so Denzel was in my team. So yeah, my team covers planning, and it was Denzel, and now Paige is doing it. But yeah, the planning code of conduct really should reflect the code of conduct that's in our constitution. Yeah,
and be in the constitution. So I've got numerous emails. I can go back to them, going back to Matt and saying, Matt, either this should be in the constitution, if it's still in force and you expect your planning committee members to abide by it and they're trained up in it and it's in the public domain, then it has to be in the constitution. It just has to be with all the other codes and protocols because that's what the constitution is for. And then when we had it for review, I think we had some comments on, if I remember, there was some very confusing areas on this big issue, which is a big issue, dual-hatted councillors, where planning application comes up at community council and it goes to planning committee. And how does that stand in terms of the law and public perception? Public perception is the public don't like it if you vote on it twice. You might think you can get away with it, and that was just left hanging, and that is a big thing that's been left hanging. So I will put that on my action list for new monitoring officer. I think that's the best way of saying there's this document out there in the public domain. Who owns it? Who writes it? Who updates it? Why isn't it in the constitution? That's very important. And maybe we need to go and look again at, are we really happy about that area of predetermination and dual-hatted members? Because that can be very difficult. And some members will say, they'll say, well, I don't mind whatever it says there. If it comes up to me and I'm a member of planning committee and I'm at my community council, I will never take part and I will always sit there and I will just listen. I will listen to what's said, but I'll never take part. I'll never vote. I'll never do it.
That's exactly what I do at my community. I can't vote because I'm not a member of my 2 community councils that I go to. But whenever planning comes up, I just don't get involved.
Yeah. And I think that's from public perception point of view. I think that's exactly correct. Yeah, that's my view.
We're particularly careful about it on my community council. As our county councillor is heavily involved in planning, but we do take great care.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the action there is for me to follow up with the new monitoring officer about this, because it just looks it's something that needs fixing in terms of constitution and fixing in terms of the training link as well. So planning committee training, and it'll be a big thing about what are the key code issues that are likely to come and hit you as member of planning committee, because you are more exposed because the public, there's winners and losers on big planning applications. There's the applicants and their agent, and then there's the objectors, and therefore there are people there watching very closely who are motivated to spot anything that they feel is a breach of the code, and there can be a lot at stake. So I think you have to be particularly careful at all the regulatory committees, planning, licensing, and if you're doing procurement decisions. Okay, so I'll follow that up in November.
Richard, can I add a further point? I was just going to say I've been a twin-hatted member myself, and I would always do exactly that and not comment. In fact, always leave the room at the community council. But that's just an aside. But I wanted to mention that also, in addition to that matter of being twin-hatted and or understanding personal or prejudicial interest, we've recently had a couple of questions at full council where members who are members of the planning committee some of them believe that they couldn't vote on a motion, a particular matter, because they were members of planning committee. So when I did my planning training, we had Morag Ellis deliver the training, planning barrister, who's very good, and she went into a great deal of detail around things like being twin-hatted members, and also the issue of, you know, sort of so, you know, we're not talking about a specific planning application, you know, when we're talking about a more general point at council, for example, when we talk about the LDP, you know, etc., whatever there is in that. So I would say that it would appear on the surface of it, by some of those questions, that there may be a requirement for a little more detailed knowledge amongst planning committee in particular. But we do get, and this is amongst members who've been members for a very long time on occasion, we do get questions around interests. For example, they're a school governor and we're not talking about that school, we're just talking about schools, you know, do I need to declare an interest? So I do wonder whether that matter, that area could benefit from, because I think when we did our code of conduct training with Matt, we were all at that time very clear that, well, yeah, that's helpful, but what really is helpful effectively are some of the case studies and some of the examples and the interactive. I think we talked about this before. I don't know if it's got lost. Certainly we have not had anything further I'm aware of. So where you actually, because when I did it, and I've done it as far back as when I was a member of Gwyn Police Authority, you have scenarios, you know, and you are working with other elected members to say what should happen in this scenario, or what, you know, let's think it through. Because actually, until you think it through, generally, it's sort of, because basically you're just taking a whole lot of information in the code of conduct. And I'm mindful as well. I mean, you know, there's always situations where I think, oh, you know, is that, I mean, obviously you have the monitoring officer to seek advice from, but unless you've read all of your papers in advance, sometimes you could be in a position where you need to. So I would just generally, and also I think that we may determine that it's helpful to refresh for members every so often, rather than just at the outset of council. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely right. No, the scenario thing is definitely not lost. It's not lost on me. I think, did we all go to the Bethan Evans training? Did you go to that? Did you go to that? Maybe it was before your time, was it?
I think it might have been, yes.
So I went on, Matt arranged training with Bethan Evans, does of this training, again, very experienced, and it's all scenario based, and it's with 2 other authorities. I think it was Rhondda, Taft, Torvine, you know, in mixed up groups and the different authorities, and it was all scenario based, and that was very helpful. So again, that's a thing on my list for new monitoring officer. Now is the time for some code of conduct refresher training, but perhaps we'll pick off specific areas using scenarios, specific areas, that areas of concern have come up over the last year. And my sense is, yes, that's a priority now for the new monitoring officer, definitely. And if necessary, someone external like Bethan Evans. So you've got Morag Ellis, who is famous in planning. Yeah, I remember from my days on the Park Authority. QC, now KC, presumably.
Casey, yes, and she did the M4 public inquiry as counsel to the Welsh Government, and I spoke at the public inquiry, and she's quite formidable in that scenario also.
Wow, you'll be very lucky then. You're very lucky.
Richard, I may be misremembering here, but wasn't the planning code of conduct that we did review, and I know it's some time ago, was quite old?
Yes, it was, but
and there was no review date, or there.
No, it wasn't clear who owned it either, no. It was left with Matt, and it was going to take, our amendments were going to be taken forward, and what I kept getting back was no planning they're about to reissue this, they're about to redo it. It didn't happen. It's a very mysterious document. It's got mysterious ownership, mysterious review cycle, and I've no idea why it is not in the Constitution. You know, it should be in the Constitution, and it isn't. And there's our amendments, have they ever been processed? Because we were concerned about that dual-hatted stuff and the language used, and we felt it was confusing. So, yeah, it's a big, I'll pick up on it. Yeah, it's an outstanding thing. Yeah, but thanks for that on the training as well. So I'll also follow up on that. I'm building up a shopping list for the new monitoring officer. So if you have any other ideas you'd like to add to it, you know, just do get in touch. Who starts on the 1st of November?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
Could we also, when you add to your shopping list, when he's doing his drafting his code of conduct training and what should be on it, could we make sure he does Welsh examples?
Oh yes.
Because
okay, yeah.
I
know.
You know, Matt frequently used English examples, and of course it's different.
He did, and he uses a case which is Kelton and Wiltshire Council, which has no relevance to Wales whatsoever.
None at all. Because
that's what we used in Herefordshire, because it's completely different law. It's about disclosable pecuniary interests, which do not exist in Welsh law. But yes, and that was a point you spotted, and we did discuss with him afterwards. So, you know, I'm hoping that the new monitoring officer will come with their own code of conduct training stuff, because I'm sure they've been through it a few times. Yes, Welsh examples, that's right. Okay, that was point number 1 on the training. Point number 2 was, again, training of co-opted members. So Matt was chasing up on the co-opted members, because we think we covered all the elected members, particularly in that first training, in the induction training in May. And then there was some follow-up thing to chase the handful who hadn't made it online. And in the end, I wrote in the standards annual report, all elected members were trained. But I think there might have been one that got away.
There was one who got away.
Might have been one that got away, but I couldn't get an answer on it. So I thought, I'm going to say all of them, because if they didn't, they should have been, because they were offered every opportunity. But that's the next issue, was the co-opted members. And it was something that Matt ran out of time with, because we are co-opted members here. We're the biggest group of co-opted members, plus Marion, 5 of us. There's now 4 on audit now, and 4 of them are new, or the chair's been there a while, but the other 4 are new. And I think there's a handful of co-opted members scattered around scrutiny committees. Is that right? There are some members on, are there members on any other committees that are not elected?
They used to be, but not now. No, not that I'm aware of. They used to be. So back in the day, there would be like on, you know, what's now your people scrutiny. Sometimes when it was like there would be some people from education, or, you know, sort of, but not the minute. But the point you make is an important one, I think, around if there's a member, and I was aware there was a member who didn't do the code of conduct training, but actually we should be aware of that, shouldn't we? Because I don't think, I'm not, you know, well, quite frankly, there were many opportunities, because Matt was also prepared to run them, or, you know, so I think it would be worthwhile. It'd be helpful for Joe and Ben to be able to let you know, you know, did that elected member complete their code of conduct training?
Yeah, it would. And I think it's related to something else that I'm going to follow up with John Pearson in Democratic Services, because in the last meeting, you remember Matt said in the minutes, there's a new learning management system being implemented by Democratic Services, which will contain training records. Yeah. So ideally what I want is something like go and press a button, or I can be alerted, like member, whoever it is, has not yet been trained in conduct. And then we can go, and I'll go myself and go, by the way, you're exposed because you need to read the aggravating factors in the sanctions guidance. And for the Ombudsman, if you persist being 1 year into, or a year and a half into being a counsellor, and you still haven't had conduct training, if you get a complaint against you, you're very exposed, particularly with the current mood of the new Ombudsman, because she's really hot on, I want to make this legally mandatory.
Also, I don't think it's helpful for the authority.
No, it isn't. And that's information on getting, was it 45, 46, proved for me extremely difficult to get. And I was on the run into the deadline. So then I thought, well, I'm just going to gamble that given the number of opportunities Matt offered people online, follow-up, individual, face-to-face, bang, that everyone's done it. So that's what the report said. I just thought, fingers crossed, that councillor doesn't put their hand up at full council and go, that's wrong. Yeah, I'm the guilty one. But no one did.
It's an aside, but I've despite my life experiences, I've recently become a school governor and have started governor training. And I noticed that my school governing body shares the governor training matrix one with another, which does concentrate my mind and has made me think, oh, I'd better do that. So I have a tick in the box so my colleagues will see I'm joining in. And we don't make a fuss about it, but we are sharing the information. Maybe the same thing could happen to the councillors, that you would have the matrix in front of you and see who's trained in which areas.
Well, yeah, and following on from what you just said, you're thinking, actually, under the councillor profile, where you see, go in, it's council this, and here's the declaration of interests. There could be something on training record there that's in the public domain that says code of conduct training, yes or no. So we'll chase that up, and it does. So just back to the co-opted members, then, Francis, thinking of what you said, because I thought. We did a dispensation request in the summer of one of the COVID summers, 21, with two, Councillor Tudor Thomas and someone called Maggie Steels, who was a co-opted member on some other committee. And so because she was a co-opted member, and they were caught by, and another point you've raised, the mess over school governors in the code. And we gave them both dispensations on public interest grounds. But she definitely wasn't at that time. She wasn't an elected member. I think at the time she was a member of Abergavenny Town Council, but she was a co-opted member on, was there a children and young persons type thing? Yeah.
So that's what I mean. There was people like that. Now Maggie, if it's the Maggie I'm thinking of, she was, as you say, a co-opted member. I've no idea in what capacity, because that's not a committee I ever attended. And Tudor Thomas was the chair of that committee, I think, wasn't he? Oh, I did. Sorry. But I don't believe that there are currently any co-opted members on any of the select committees. So you've got people, place, and public service. What's the other one, Faye?
Performance and overview.
Performance and overview.
And democratic services.
Yeah, so performance and overview.
Okay, so Amy, can I ask you could you check that for us about, are there any co-opted members outside Governance and Audit and us Standards Committee? it was over in about 5 seconds when he presented it as a constitution update. But the background, like, do I need to report gifts I turned down over the threshold, which we said yes, you should be doing. That didn't really stand out. And the difference between the two decisions, which is do I accept or not, do I register or not? One's a judgment call, one should be black and white. And that's what I want to go into the training, because we didn't have a standalone, I wanted a standalone policy that would have set, it would only been 2 pages, but it would set out those things. And now it's just lost in a couple of paragraphs right at the end of the code of conduct, which may not get noticed. So I wanted to make sure that we get our thoughts on gifts and hospitality into that training and find out who owns it and what the timetable is.
Chair, apologies, I've just got to take a call. Hopefully I'll just take the call and then rejoin, but I'm just going to put my camera off while I do that. Is that okay? Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry.
Thank you. And then we're back to on my final list, which you've already done, the learning management system, about who is John Pearson doing that and what state is it at and who will have access to it. Because obviously what we'd like to be able to do is go and see online exactly who and when. For any councillor, when did they last have code of conduct training? Be helpful. I think that's it for conduct training, which was a verbal report. Anything else in training? We've caught it. Welsh examples. I've definitely, because that Kelton case, we used it all the time in England, all the time. Yeah, it's not in Wales. Monitoring. So the next thing is the annual report of the Standards Committee for 2022-23. So this went to council on the 21st of September, and I presented it remotely, and I prepared quite a long script, thinking I want to make sure it's sort of watertight. And I thought I anticipated some tricky questions from, some of the usual suspect councillors who are good at that sort of thing. And in front of me was audit and governance, and they did get a tricky question. However, I noticed that the chair of audit and governance very neatly sidestepped it and passed it straight to the officers, which I thought was right. I thought that's what I'll do if anything happens. Anyway, I did it, and there were no questions, and there was just a thank you from the leader. So that's the annual report. I just wanted to put it there. That's the final version. You saw all of it apart from sections, the paragraphs about training and the paragraphs about the numbers. And I couldn't do the numbers until I had the annual report. So that's why it all was tied together, and off it went. And, I look at it now and I think that's fine. And I presented it as, it's not really about us. It's the annual member conduct report. Because audit's annual report in front of us was very internal, because they've got 12 members, they met 9 times, they have huge agendas, they have loads of external people there from Wales Audit, external auditors, and they have stuff that goes on and very detailed. And theirs was very much, this is how we're working internally and these are our issues. And whereas ours is very much, this is your scorecard. And actually, well done. It was 0, 0 and 0. And that's it. Really, with a few areas of assurance, which were, did the group leaders do what they said? Were people properly trained, etc.? So, does anyone have any final comments on that? I think it's as we discussed before, with just those 2 amended areas, and that's it. No, done. And that leads on to then the final thing, which is the Welsh Government guidance, which I have to switch now to more paperwork. Yeah. The Welsh Government finally published their guidance on the 2 new duties, which is section 62 and section 63. So the political group leader stuff and our annual report. And the final version came out on the 15th of June this year. And just to wind back, at our meeting in March 2022, we looked at the draft guidance. That means that the only people who saw the draft guidance is Peter, Rhiann and me, because no one else was a member at the time. There was a consultation. We didn't respond because we had no major issues, so we just left that. The consultation ended in May 2022. However, the new duties came into force also in May 2022. Immediately, Matt emailed all the group leaders, copied me as chair. He said, you've got these new responsibilities under section 62 of the Act. And he explained the connection with our new duties, because whilst group leaders have to promote high conduct, we have to report on that. So it's it's locked together, that's interconnected. And they also have to legally cooperate with us in the exercise of our functions. Another interesting one. Matt alerted the group leaders in May 2022. The thing was finally published in June this year. I did send you a link, but again, I said you don't need to read the whole thing. It's 161 pages. It's consolidated guidance. It covers all sorts of areas. We've just got a small bit, which is part 2, sections 4 to 7. So the paper that came with the meeting papers is just an extract, and it's only the relevant sections. Part 2, sections 4 to 7 inclusive. So what I thought I'd do is I just go through the final version, and I'll point out the changes from the draft. And please do interrupt if you've got any questions or issues, because the changes are quite interesting. Because one thing we saw, we didn't really have much to say about it, really. But, well, given you put this into law, that was already a done deal. There needs to be some guidance. But there are some interesting and, in some ways, curious changes, which I'll just go through. So the first one I noticed is on paragraph 4.29 on page number 25, and above it, paragraph 4.28. 4.28 was there before, but we probably just whizzed over it without realising the significance of it. A political group leader who fails to comply with the new duty in a meaningful way, whatever that means, may potentially be regarded as bringing their office into disrepute. And as we said, disrepute is a bad breach. So that's quite, heavy, really. If you get it wrong, that's where you're heading. And it does reference the Ombudsman's guidance, and that actually is in paragraph 1.27 of the Ombudsman guidance. It's exactly the same thing in the current version. And what they added was 4.29. And look at this here. Political group leaders will want to ensure they're able to evidence the steps they have taken. So this is like you, group leaders, it's almost like keeping accounting records. It's keeping records of what you've done and when over the year. And that appeared as a brand new paragraph. And just more in terms of the regulation of group leaders, 4.36 appeared. At the beginning of each council year, political group leaders should meet with the Standards Committee to agree the following. How they'll work together, frequency of meetings, threshold, how the threshold which Standards Committee will use to establish whether it is content that political group leaders have complied with their duties, and the reporting mechanism. And again, that's it's quite strong regulation, really, isn't it? And when this came up in the online meeting of all the chairs of all the standards committees and monitoring officers as well, I think there is quite a lot of concern amongst certainly monitoring officers. I'm not so much on chairs. I don't know about how's this going to work, really, because all of a sudden you're saying group leaders are elected members and they're elected group leaders having to come and do as they're told with a standards committee, essentially. So how that will work, I don't know. We didn't do it last year. So this, again, is a matter for new monitoring officer, because now it's actually written down. That's the responsibility on them. So I don't know how that will work, and we'll have to see, really.
Have we ever been told who the members, who the political group leaders are? I don't recall having been told there.
Oh, yes, I was. Sorry, straight off. Oh, yeah. So Matt covered it off in May 2022, immediately after the election. I've got the email. I could forward you the email. I don't see why not. I'll forward it to you. He wrote to the group leaders and basically said, just be aware, this new duty has just come into force, and it means you have a legal responsibility to do this. And it interacts with a new duty on your standards committee, which have also responsibility to report on you doing it or not. And here's a link to the draft guidance. So we put all that down. And I understand, they did have the political group leaders meetings. We're going throughout the year, and that was discussing if conduct came up, they'd discuss conduct. So they were made aware of it very early in May 2022, almost. I guess the group leaders probably only just elected then anyway, because the election was about the 5th of May. So probably group leaders were determined in the days afterwards, because they had to win their seats, of course, to get back in. And probably on day one, and 11th of May, if I remember, 2022, he sent them a notification. However, this only appeared in June this year. So my attitude to it was, therefore, it only comes into force when it's published. So it's a responsibility for us this year. Yeah. And so it's really down to, although some authorities, monitoring officers, have been doing annual reports for a long time, and I suspect some authorities will be ahead of us on complying with all this new stuff. So I'll have to wait and see.
I mean, it's got a should in it, not a could.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I was looking at.
Yeah.
Trying to work out the difference between should and must, because higher up they do say must.
Yeah.
About
well, must is a duty, doesn't it, to be in law?
But this is just you should.
Best practices
should. Yes.
Must is we're telling you to do it.
Right. Yes, isn't it? But there is a difference.
Yeah. And it becomes the difference if you're picked up from it later, if there's a should or a must.
Yeah.
And obviously, if someone's reviewing it at a later stage because there's a criticism or problem, then must and should becomes.
Excuse my ignorance. Is it the beginning of the council year? Is that a fixed date or is it just something that
annual meeting when all the committee seats are divvied up and everything? So May time, is it?
Faye probably tell us. When is it, Faye?
It would be at the AGM.
I reckon
in May.
I reckon May, a council annual meeting when they decide chairs and stuff. And
if this becomes an obligation, then it doesn't fit our current committee schedule at all, really.
Yeah.
So we meet in February and
well the other ways, when the first annual report thing, we played it that because the legislation came into effect after something else had happened, we didn't have to do it for another year. So you could interpret this guidance on this that actually this only came into force on June 2023. Therefore, the next start of council year is 2024. So we start it next year, which actually is what's going to happen anyway, isn't it? Because we haven't done it.
Would we have to do that? Would we have to have that meeting? Should a meeting take place?
Well, I mean, if there's
outside of current schedule,
possibly, yeah. And
you couldn't wait until October. It's the beginning of the council year.
No. I mean, I think the new monitoring officer will have a view on this. My impression is all councils they're all struggling with what does this all mean? It's completely new. It's changed everything. And some of them are very uncomfortable with this idea that what it appears from this guidance and from the legislation is that if you're a political group leader, you're elected by representatives, and then hang on, now there's a standards committee and I have to do what they tell me, and I'm somehow accountable to them in a way, nothing to do with the code, and I have these responsibilities. So I'm not clear how it will work out, but we'll have to change. We will have to change the way we do things. I did discuss with Matt, there was an authority, one of the northern authorities had said they were uncomfortable with this sort of, we can summon group leaders in and ask them, hold them to account. So they got them to fill in like a self-assessment questionnaire thing, like tick the box, have you done this, have you done that? And then they submitted the forms. And I did show that to Matt. And I did ask him how could we handle it this year? Because in the Standards Committee annual report, we have to give an assurance, did the group leaders do the right thing? Yeah. And so I did. Basically, I said, the monitoring officer told us that he gave us the assurance that the group leaders did the right thing, because I felt that was very similar to the way, if you're on audit, internal audit, auditors come in and say, we've just audited this part of your operation and we can give you our audit opinion is that of an assurance that this area is working properly. So I thought, he's the monitoring officer, he told us it's working properly, I'll put that in the annual report. But this stuff now, you must do this, you must do that, you must have these meetings, all of these things. It does change everything. And you're right, Peter, about the timing. What's the timing mean? Does it mean this current year, or does it mean we're safe until May 2024?
I mean, there's a suggestion in that paragraph 436 that there'll be several meetings.
Yes.
With the
Frequency.
standard.
Yeah, no, but why? I'm thinking why?
Yeah.
Why? Okay, well, and also why? And so, are you serious? You're going to have special meetings with group leaders, and for what purpose? Particularly if we've got a situation like last year, when in the annual report, remember, it's a nil return. Remember, no notices from the ombudsman, no hearings, no adjudication panels. That's it. Right. So, are they going to get us all together and pay us our daily rate to come in and have extra meetings with group leaders? I don't know. I question.
Yeah.
I think it's a thing we have to part, because I think the new monitoring officer will have a view on this, and maybe Cardiff have already done it, or they're already doing it.
The must is in paragraph 433.
Sorry, Mike,
Yeah.
I missed that. What chapter?
Well, 433 must cooperate with the standards committee. Yes, that's right.
And then after that, they're all shoulds, which will enable that must, I suppose.
So we could use the must and say, we don't really need loads of meetings.
Yeah.
We're going to have one, and you must come to it.
Good.
So, sure. Okay. I think the answer of this is going to be on the shopping list. Okay.
Yeah.
But just be aware that what I notice in the change between the draft that the three of us saw and this is they've really tightened it and become a lot more prescriptive, is my impression, with what they've added that we didn't have in March 2022.
Well, there's also a duty on us as well to establish the threshold as to what we are content with the political leaders complying with. So, you know, that means we've got to work out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, quite rightly, if we're going to demand a meeting with them, then we have to have a measure.
So this is heading into, you know, sort of quite heavy. It could be interpreted as quite sort of heavy-handed conduct policing.
Yes,
it does.
You know, whereas we've always been at arm's length as a standards committee, and the necessity for intervention comes with serious complaints getting into the ombudsman and everything that follows from that, or it could be in a serious conduct meltdown at a community council, you know, where it's tit for tat complaints and the clerk and all of that, and that I have seen that happen in England. And then you maybe have to be more active, but we've always been oversight has been our role. We've got to make sure training's in place. We've got to make sure the policies are up to date. We have to make sure we are following and aware of adjudication panel advice, ombudsman advice, Welsh Government advice, guidance, bang, all of that. But this is like, what are we going to be doing next? Are we going to be, you know, there like sitting in the council meeting as some sort of observer?
It does have that smack of it.
You know, it feels very prescriptive.
If I start thinking about how a Monmouthshire County Council and Standards Committee and the Monitoring Officer have related to the council members previously, quite a lot of these things in these bullet points our monitoring officer has done. So he has done the threshold of you know,
of course,
what the political leader should be aiming for with their members. He had could be he, she in the future, but the past one was he would report to us as to how the political leaders were managing things. So he was the kind of screen between us being fully independent and you know, he kind of was the filter.
The example would be he's the professional external auditor and we're the audit committee.
Yes.
And the external auditor, qualified, specialist, professional, comes in and says, I've audited this area and I can give you, I'm confident in assurance that blah, 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 it's meeting these requirements. So what I had to, in the act that sets out the content of the annual report, I had to report on compliance of political group leaders with new conduct duties. And so I just put in here just exactly what you said, but in I said, the monitoring officer has corresponded with the group leaders who are all content they have carried out their new duties regarding standards and have no issues to raise. Based on the advice given monthly and pre-council meetings and informal communication throughout the year, the monitoring officer is satisfied that all 3 group leaders complied with the 2 duties set out above, which is exactly what you said.
Yeah.
So Matt was doing it. He gives the assurance. I put the assurance in the annual report. This is a bit different.
Yeah, it's changed the emphasis,
Yeah.
hasn't it? I mean, maybe they want more transparency for,
Yeah.
the general public, the people who vote for our councillors,
Yeah.
rather than,
Yeah.
a professional officer filtering what the standards committee hears and sees. I mean, maybe there's been other authorities where the monitoring officer hasn't been as scrupulous as perhaps they should have been.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
something has changed, hasn't it?
It has. It really has. And that's why I thought it's interesting to see what they added as new. They didn't tone it down as a result of their consultation. If anything, they went more prescriptive, detailed, and more stuff that we and the group leaders will have to do.
I wonder if our group leaders, we haven't got Frances here, but maybe Faye knows, because she would have been directed by a group leader. I wonder if our group leaders know that this responsibility has arisen.
I
No,
don't know. It's nothing we've discussed in our group, so.
no. I think given that, so when this came out, given I knew that the timing meant it came out in June, so you could easily argue it's not valid for the current year because of the dates of the timing. So we have another year to play with. And I knew Matt was leaving. So I thought I'm not going to send this to the group leaders, because how we implement this and whether, and the difference between must and should and could, is a discussion for the new monitoring officer.
Yeah.
It's not, there's no point starting doing something and then someone coming and going, no, I think I want to do it this way, and this is how to do it in Cardiff. And I think we do have some time, because they delayed getting out the statutory guidance to June this year. So
Yeah.
but it is extremely prescriptive.
I'm sure you have. I haven't. I only just have. Have you looked at paragraphs, section 6?
Yeah, hang on. I will get there. Let me get there. I'll catch you up. Let's just say that's fine. So that was it. So that's 4.36, brand new. Oh, and just a note, by the way, 4.37. Group leaders should observe the Ombudsman's guidance and the sanctions guidance issued by APW, which I hadn't noticed before. So they're now raising up the sanctions guidance as equal in importance to this, which is the Code of Conduct guidance. So that's just another reminder to keep that. I'll get to 6. Just another thing. We move on to page 28, paragraph 5.7. And here we go again. They added to 5.7, principal council standards committees should play a proactive role in promoting and supporting high standards of conduct in town and community councils in their area. Up to that point, I'm happy with that. And then it goes, for example, by visiting them, working together to share good practice and identifying training opportunities. Okay, well, again,
Turn it into a part-time job.
I think Matt told me that in Cardiff they've only got. He said they do visit their community council, but they've only got 6, I think. So we've got 33, and also, if the numbers show there isn't a problem, and unless there is, a serious bust up in a community council, which you soon spot, because you'll get one council where there'll be 3, 4, 5 complaints, and you get member and member complaints, and then the other things are you'll have possibly an unhappy clerk, or clerks will resign. Again, by visiting them, working share good practice, identifying. One Voice Wales provides a very comprehensive set of training materials online. Most councils subscribe to that. It's readily available in different units, covering all sorts of aspects of being a town or community councillor. So again, why or under what circumstances, a proactive role in promoting high standards of conduct in town and community councils? Well, to a degree, again, very, very prescriptive, and I don't see. I also think, how would community councils react if we turn up with clipboards, And can you imagine? I was a community councillor and I was chair at Craccorney, and I in the reaction actually. So I'll move on from that one. And here,
I'm just speculating here, but I'm wondering whether the changes has been a result of other, we would have all consulted. Maybe this has come from the direction of the Ombudsman or the adjudication panel to reduce the work they have to do.
yeah.
So they want, particularly if Michelle Morris is saying, I want mandatory training.
But again, the adjudication panel have had a very busy year with 4 hearings, all on the papers.
Rushed off their feet.
So, and given the 730 town and community councils in Wales, you're never going to get, trying to get to a 0 complaints situation will never happen and should never happen, because if you do, it means that your public engagement has disappeared. So you will never get to 0 complaints. So if we end up having every year across the whole of Wales between 4 and 6 adjudication panel hearings, I wouldn't be worried about it.
200 and some odd complaints to the Ombudsman.
Yeah. But remember, 1 in 8, only 1 in 8 are investigated.
35.
Yeah. So if they are thinking, let's get it down to 0, it's not realistic, and I'd also argue it's not an efficient use of resources, actually. And if the system's working, and it feels a bit like, the whole Penn report thing appeared to me to be panicking about town and community councils, and this year's data doesn't support that at all, given the number of town and community councils. So anyway, this says, should play, back to should, by visiting them. Anyway, I have a view on that, but with that again, let's wait and see. New 5.10, gifts and hospitality. They just added this. We would expect us to regularly review the approach taken in respect of gifts and hospitality and the use of thresholds. It should be in our annual reports. You routinely discussed. Yes, that's new, but a bit so what. It will be now, because we fixed the thing which Monmouthshire didn't have. They didn't have monetary threshold, and they didn't have the online access to the gifts and hospitality register. So in our meeting when we discussed it, there were 2 big holes that we plugged. That's fixed. So 5.10 doesn't matter. If we go on to 6 now, and which were on 6, whereabouts on 6 were you looking, Mike, there? Because I have 6.4 is brand new, by the way. Page 30, paragraph 6.4.
Right. Again, that's a should.
Yeah. So it's the flip side of the same text, in a way that appeared back in the on the group leaders, isn't it? It's the same responsibility, that it's pointing out that it's on, you've got to do it as well as the group leaders. The frequency of meetings each year, etc. Annual reporting processes, issues arising from the analysis of complaints in respect of standards of behaviour.
You see the must then in 6.3.
Yeah.
Must provide advice and training, or arrange to train group leaders on the new duty.
Yeah. Well, again, my view on that was that's for Matt to do. That's how we worked in the past.
Yeah.
He gave that assurance back into the annual report. So based on the advice given, blah 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 blah, etc. The Montrose office is satisfied. They complied with the duties, and back to the timing of this, because this didn't come out till June 2023, I suppose we do have the response to it that therefore it's only valid for the next year. It kicks us into 2024, but it's the same thing written down, this time for the Standards Committee.
There's a reference to the timing Peter was referring to. At the start of each administration, this should take place within 6 months. That's the meeting of the election, and be reviewed at least annually.
Yeah.
So if Faye is saying that, the roles are settled in May, so we've got until late autumn to have that first meeting with the political group leaders.
Yeah. Okay, so if I'm taking a liberal interpretation of when this came into force, I'd say it came into force in June, so that applies at the start of the next administration, because they delayed it. They put these new duties came out on the 5th of May 2022. There was no guidance at all other than the draft. They finished the consultation, they published the responses in June of that year, and we waited a whole another year. And I chased it with the Welsh Government earlier this year, and they said, no, we're not going to give you that now. We're going to put it into this huge book of consolidated guidance about everything, which they did, which is why it took so long. So the flip side of that is, I would argue, well, yes, we're reading this now, but actually some of these provisions we can say don't apply until the next local government year, which would start in May 2024. But again, it'll be on the shopping list, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Might be nearer the top of the shopping list.
It might be, no, but it's a big change from Standards Committee as sort of oversight, sort of strategy, as about really keeping a close eye on the big players in the framework, you know, which is the Welsh Government, the panel, and the Ombudsman, to going and, you know, out and visiting community councils and telling group leaders what to do. I think that's a big jump. And my sense at the last Standards Committee all chairs meeting of all the authorities was that I think there's a lot of uncertainty and nervousness about that, about how is that really going to work? An elected group leader and a Standards Committee, which is largely composed of independent members with an independent chair who are not elected. You know, how are we going to change it like that? So let's wait and see. I think Cardiff may have been doing things ahead of us. I mean, they've been doing annual reports way before it became a statutory thing. And I think Matt said they've been doing visits, observation visits, I think, to community councils, but they've got 6 and they're probably all in the city.
I mean, I'm just trying to think through a scenario which Francis was referring to earlier, that's the best way to train. And I'm just thinking, well, just think of a scenario of this. And if we met with group leaders, and I mean, we'd have to be careful not to give advice, because all of a sudden we've immediately compromised our position as a
exactly
committee.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, you know, it's a real challenge to have that meeting.
I think it is. It's so that what's our role? I've always felt that as an independent member, we should be at arm's length from the authority. You know, we should be at arm's length from operational stuff.
Yeah.
And also we should be looking externally, and we should be aware of the conduct stuff that's going on elsewhere, and whether it's in the Senedd or whether it's the Committee on Standards in Public Life or other members of other authorities, what happens to them at the panel, what's coming on from the Ombudsman, you know, Welsh Government, etc. But we should be very, very independent, you know, and that's hence the criteria for our recruitment. And for us to start giving advice on statutory guidance, you know,
Well, the word advice appears in paragraph 6.3. Must also provide advice.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think it
is changing things. If you can read it in a way that means it changes things massively, and it would mean lots more meetings, and it would mean lots more office support, and it would mean lots more cost for the authority. That's my view of it. It's just from oversight to being conduct police.
Well, what's the name of our new monitoring officer?
James Williams.
Yeah. Be a busy man.
Yeah. So if we go on 7, duty of Standards Committee to make annual report. 7.3, they added the second bullet point. Confirm the operation of local protocol, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, I had 100% foresight, and I did do that in the annual report. So you can tick that box. Include an analysis of complaints. This must include information about the number of councils who have been subject to a complaint which has been upheld, whether or not they attended training, going to the number of complaint received. Well, Matt said, obviously we had no official notices during that year, or that referred to that year. Again, he gave me the assurance that the informal complaints, nothing met the threshold. There were no matters that escalated to the point of requiring the instigation of the protocol or self-regulation of member conduct, which is something we reviewed recently in the Constitution. So back to the assurance thing, you know, and back to that relationship, we rely on him. He can come back and explain what he's done, and we might say, why didn't you do this? But he comes back with the assurance. I just put the assurance in the report. I don't say we went out and did this. Something else New, yeah, and then another new, the final bullet point on the page, or one up. In the case of a principal council, set out how it has worked with the town and community councils in its area to promote and maintain high standards of conduct amongst town and community councillors. Well, they've got their own legal pressures. They legally have to have a training plan. It must include code of conduct training. They're nearly all signed up to One Voice Wales, which offers all of this stuff online, instantly available for a fixed price. Again, that can mean various things. I guess we could get more in saying that our county councillors who attend community council meetings, we would expect, if you spotted something that you weren't sure about conduct-wise, or you were unhappy about, you'd either come back to Matt or the monitoring officer, or you'd possibly discuss it personally with whoever's the chair or with the clerk. You know, I think if you're a county councillor and either you're a member or you're an observer of a community council meeting, if something came up you weren't happy with, you should probably raise it. But that's an informal method. Again, I can't see us going out and just for the sake of it, turning up on a cold, wet night in November on a Thursday to some community council. Yeah, Grosmont you could go to. How about that? Go up to Grosmont Council on Tuesday night or something and be chucking down and sit there with a clipboard and say, "What are you here for?" "I'm here to observe your meeting and give you a mark out of 10 for your conduct."
I think you could say that most community council meetings now are accessible online.
Yeah.
You don't actually have to be there.
Yeah.
I can see that someone could sit in the background.
Yeah.
But again, such a task.
Yeah. So there's
Can
that.
I just ask a question on community councils?
Yeah, sure.
Obviously, I know my community councils have training records. Do we ever see them as a standards committee? Do they get sent to you? Just
No.
wonder if it would be a good idea to have them sent, and then you've got, you know, a record of what training has been undertaken. I know my community council at the moment, I'm trying to arrange for them to have some planning training, not by Planning Aid Wales, but by the authority, because they want a deeper understanding of Monmouthshire's planning policies. So I'm trying to arrange that with Craig O'Connor now. But as this is now put in there, rather than visiting community councils, which I think, you know, is not particularly a helpful thing to do, but, you know, they do represent residents over our county, and I just wonder if we should get training records and then maybe make recommendations and say, well, actually, you know, you're missing training on this, that and that. It's just a thought. I don't know what everybody else feels.
Yes, there's a couple of things you mentioned there I want to build on though. First of all, the planning training for community councils. When I was a community councillor in Crowcorney, we took up all community councillors with the chance to went into the old county hall in Cwmbran and had a planning training for community councillors, and it was a big long session with multiple speakers, you know, in a big chamber. It's very good. And so if there is that is something else, is would the planning function officers, whoever here, be interested in doing not just for your community council, because if they're doing it for one, well, why not do it? It's the same effort. Do it for a bigger group. So we could ask that as well. Ask that of planning. And the training records thing, that's interesting because they have to have a training plan by law, and they have to report on it, don't they? They have to report on it every year and update it. That's one of the new things.
That is.
So we'll check on that, because I think there's a new, separate to us, there's a new duty on all town and community councils. They must have. I think it came into force in November last year.
Yeah.
Because and also in the statutory guidance it says, and it must cover code of conduct. And I suspect that in that provision, we'll check on what's the provision on the training plan, which is mandatory, and do you have to review that, and do you have to publish the results of it in the public domain? Because I think they almost certainly will have to put it's the first year of the compulsory training plan, and I think they'll have to put the results of that in the public domain this year, would be my guess. But it's good, very good question, and it's related to something else. In fact, I had correspondence. I can't remember what I was asking. Oh, I know. I was asking the Ombudsman about, remember when they said there was a correlation between not not attending training and code of conduct breaches. And I asked her about, you know, where's the data? She didn't come back with the data, but she said, she started going about training in this email. And she said, you could ask One Voice Wales to find out for all your community councils in Monmouthshire, all 33, they might be willing to tell us how many purchases there's been of the online code of conduct training.
They could easily.
Do you think that would work?
I-
Yeah, because they would have a record, because you have to pay for it, don't you? You
Yes.
remember, because you remember, and you get a fixed rate. So you're a new community councillor, One Voice Wales, you get these lists, you can log on, and it's 30 quid or something to do the code of conduct training online. So I'll investigate that with One Voice Wales as well now, because then we could have two things. We could say, where's your new training plan, which must say, how did your old training plan go? And also One Voice Wales might say, you've got 10 councils in your area who have downloaded 0 code of conduct training in the last year, and here they are. And then we could write to them and say, we're concerned, and that would be a quick way of doing it, wouldn't it? Much better way. So and using the systems that are already there. So
this whole issue of training becomes desperately complicated. When I became a community councillor, I had to do the code of conduct training.
Mhm.
I had to do that and the induction section, but you never need to go back. You never need to go back and revisit it. Whereas now I am a governor, I am seeing things that governors have to revisit every 2 or 3 years to make sure they're up to date. The implications are immense.
yeah,
And, you know, people are not rushing to become governors.
no,
And one of the reasons they're not rushing to become governors is the amount of training that has to be undertaken for, you know, a community.
yeah, voluntary role.
A voluntary role.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, you know, it will be difficult to get all community councillors to pop in here during the working day. To
Oh, no,
complete
no,
training
yeah,
session,
no.
you know, all those issues will,
Yeah,
as they do for county councillors, you know,
Yeah.
that they have a mass of other pressures.
Yeah.
That it's
Yeah.
it's difficult.
yeah, and
I think there should be a register. I think people should be. I think we should know, and that information should be shared, and it should be
yeah,
visible. You know.
yeah.
But gosh,
I think if just thinking though about this then, so if we've got responsibility for promoting high standards in the town and community councils in 33, I still think the best route is through, if you like, empowering and supporting the clerks. I think that's a really important route, because then you've got 33 key people who we could have in, as Matt did in that first year, did that clerks conference, didn't he? And doing something for clerks so that they feel more empowered, they know how to answer the questions, they have access to the resources, they have fast track to the monitoring officers if they've got a query on things. And also then if the other community, if the members then know that the clerk is getting special training and special advice, then there's likely to be more respect for the advice of the clerk. And so you do it that way. So you make the clerks have more confidence and expertise in the code. I think that would be a better way, rather than thinking we're going to go and observe meetings or visit them, I think.
I mean, the other 7.8 also
Yes.
suggesting that the standards report, which of course now becomes quite a large document if we have to comply with everything in these paragraphs, should then be sent to the Public Service Ombudsman, but also to every town and county councillor. Which is again another cost,
thing.
and you know, it's officer time. It's
Well, there'll be an email list. I mean,
but I mean,
it's another thing. It's another thing,
isn't it?
Another thing. Yeah. So if you'd see back on there, just going back to 7.5 gifts and hospitality, that's just a restatement of what it said earlier. But 7.7 is new. This may include recommendations to the full council and town community councils in areas about matters such as mandating training inequalities and the model code of conduct. Well, hang on. If the Welsh government can't mandate training, we can't mandate training.
Yeah,
that's it. So over to you, Michelle Norris. You know, if you can change the law, then obviously they'll have to comply with it.
Maybe this has been put in to allow her to do this.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure that's the feeling I get, is that that's what they want. But to look at the length of time, though, to get legislation about this in force, you're talking years, wouldn't you?
Potentially.
Realistically, given the speed of other local government legislation, it's not going to happen fast if it requires changes to election law. So
7.4 is quite interesting as well, I suppose, which is also addressing what the Ombudsman may see as a nil return.
yeah, so again, I used my let's model this on being on an audit committee where the external auditors come in and report to you. So I just put here where it is in here, and I'll find it. There were no matters that escalated to the point of requiring the instigation of the protocol for self-regulation of member conduct in the Constitution, because we typically have never had any information at all about informal internal complaints, because we've always been at the serious end.
It will always be a nil return, won't it? Because we won't get to see that.
Yeah, but not if this goes this way, because so are these meetings with group leaders, are they going to be in closed session so that they can say, I've got a real problem with member X, you know, because despite my thing, this is what's happening and I'm concerned about this. Now that's a discussion that a group leader should have with the monitoring officer, I think, and it's pulling us into dangerous territory. Have you pointed out about the advice, and I don't like it personally, and I think it's changing our role without, for me, the evidence to justify the need to change the role. What's not working, I'd say, that's justified all of this very prescriptive, quite heavy-handed, if I was a group leader, over-regulation of behaviour. That's how I feel it is. And I say, what's the problem? Look at us, nil return last year. What's the problem? Things are in place. Everyone got trained. We've done the assurances. You know, nothing even triggered the protocol for self-regulation of member, which is the member-on-member thing that we looked at. Nothing triggered it. That's Matt said. Those are his words that I lifted. I said, Matt, I need an answer to this. He said, okay, so I'm going to put that text in the report. That's it, done. So this has been very much on the audit committee, external auditor model. These are 3 areas of assurance. I've had the assurance, we're happy with it. It's gone in the report. A lot of the thrust of this is you, the standards committee, will be going out and doing this yourselves. And I think it means huge changes. So as you said, it could be the top item on the shopping list, I think. There's not much more.
Well, the minute I start seeing the word advice, I start a bit twitchy, because I'm sure Ben, as a lawyer, would tell us that that's a word that you treat with caution.
Yeah. We can do a lot of work sometimes.
It does. Yeah. There's a lot of work. It's a small word, but has a lot of power. Yeah.
So, and that, I'm very pleased to say, that is the end of the new statutory guidance just in force in June. And that's it for the business items on the agenda. The 2 next, I did put this in deliberately. Provisional meeting dates for 24-25 are already on the calendar, just to let you know. But the calendar is provisional because the meeting calendar, I think, is only signed off at the start of the local government year. Is that right? However, in our case, they probably won't change unless we want them to change, because they are Mondays. And I'm pleased to see we've gone up to, interestingly, we've gone up to 4 a year. I asked us to go up to 3. After, we were in the COVID period. 1 year we did 1. I said to Matt, we need to go up to 3 at least. He went up to 3. When I looked on the calendar, we're now up to 4, equally spaced around, all Mondays. So Mondays at 10 o'clock. But at least you've got the dates now, till right through to 2025. And then the date of our next meeting is, as usual, Monday, 10 o'clock, is Monday, the 26th of February, 2024.
What about the additional meeting?
The additional meeting, I mean, well, that's...
You got a date for it?
No, because there is no person in post.
No.
That's point 1. And all I can say is, I would say it's not clear to me that the amount of preparation work that will be required to conduct the meeting properly. Okay, because of the complexity of the issues raised, both legal and code of conduct. That's where I got to that point.
Okay, so we'll be informed as soon as.
Yeah, and it may be that actually I'm being far too optimistic on that schedule, because if his start date of the 1st and then to be hit with this on top of everything else.
We have some induction training from the council.
Yeah. So I maybe being, and yeah. Okay, I think
Just keep us up to date.
yeah. What we'll do now then, the date of next meeting is 26th February. So now I'm going to close the meeting at 11:50, and thank you all for your contributions. And
do you need to formally defer the item?
Oh yes, sorry, yes. Item 14 has been formally deferred to a later date to be announced. Thank you. Yeah. And I'll close the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.